What is up, Packers fans? Happy Wednesday. Welcome into an all-new episode of the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. You can find the podcast at Pack a Day Podcast. Thank you, as always, for being here. Make sure to like, subscribe, comment, give those 5-star reviews if you're on an audio podcast channel. Also, if you're on the YouTube channel, make sure to hit that little bell and notification to make sure that you get those notifications every time a new episode is released. Today, we're going to be going over some additional free agents and trade candidates that the Packers could potentially target before the start of the season. We're going to get there. We're going to discuss all of them, the Rasul Douglases, the Trey Hendricksons, the TJ Watts. We're going to go on and on. There's a lot of people out there, Asante Samuel Jr., that people want the Packers to acquire. Today, we're going to go through each and every one of them and discuss if they are viable options or if Green Bay should ultimately stay away. Of course, yesterday, we talked about Jalen Ramsey. I was very surprised, by the way, with some of the reaction to that of some people just having like zero interest whatsoever in Jalen Ramsey. Usually I feel like I have a pretty decent pulse on that. And this one definitely, and to be fair, there was a lot of people that were very much for it and a lot of people that were very interested. Some people that very clearly commented on the video without listening to it. You can always tell those pretty quickly and easily. But there was definitely a subset of people that just had no interest whatsoever, which I know there's always going to be a few, right? But there was more than I was expecting. I'll just put it that way. Definitely wasn't thinking that it was going to be for everyone or that it wasn't going to be without some level of, again, maybe if this would happen or if that would happen. But just a lot of like unequivocal no's, not interested, hate the guy. Like, dude won a Super Bowl. For all the he's a cancer, things like that. He won a Super Bowl with the Rams and he's been playing really good football as of late. And like people say, well, why not just keep Jair? Well, Jalen Ramsey actually plays football year in and year out. As we talked about, 7 seasons of 1,000 snaps or more, even the other 2, he played pretty, a decent chunk of snaps in the 2 he didn't play 1,000. So I was a little bit surprised on some of that, but I still stand by my stance. I think he would make a really great defensive back in Green Bay. I think there's a lot of reasons to do it. And if you missed out on that episode yesterday, I highly recommend checking it out and actually listening to it before you jump to any conclusions. But I do think he would be a really good fit in Green Bay. But I digress. That's not our episode today. That was our episode yesterday. But today we'll go through everyone else that's out there, kind of more lightning round, and decide and discuss if they would be a good fit or if they would not. Before we get there, we do have one pretty interesting topic that came up from Tuesday, and that was that Ed Policy did a interview with some of the local media. Just his first opportunity really to meet with the media since being named president and CEO, and was asked about Matt LaFleur and Brian Gutekunst and whether or not they would get contract extensions. And Policy said they've got 2 years left on both of their deals. We're not planning on doing anything at this point in time. I would assume that is pretty standard. Like they both have 2 years left on the deal. Now, think of how the Packers run with regular player contracts, right? Usually when you get to those 2 years left, you're still usually looking at, pushing it out until you're in that final year. And then Policy said they don't like going into lame duck years. So you would expect that Matt LaFleur and Brian Gutekunst are probably going to be up for extensions this upcoming offseason. No, I did not read into it. If you read it, Rob Domofsky did a great job of covering this over on ESPN. He said that they're thrilled with what basically is going on with Matt LaFleur and Russ Ball. I should put Russ Ball in that category as well as Brian Gutekunst. There's zero controversy here. There's no concern. There's no anyone on the hot seat or anything like that. This is just, again, how these contract situations usually go. You get to the final year, then you extend and so on and so forth. So barring anything catastrophic this year where Green Bay has a terrible year, I would expect that Brian Gutekunst, Russ Ball, and Matt LaFleur all get extensions this upcoming offseason. But there is a full season left. And if something catastrophic does happen, or if the season is just very poor, then those conversations become a little bit more interesting. But for now, does not seem to be any issue, just more waiting until the season's done. And then we'll kind of take it from there with all parties involved. Again, Goody, Russ Ball, and Matt LaFleur. I thought from a positive standpoint, he talked about not wanting to meddle in anything, that his job is to hire these people and then let them do their job. That is a great thing. He did make a mention of, and this is the quote from Rob Domofsky's article, Policy said he will, quote, increase the amount and the time of formal meetings with football leadership in an effort to facilitate communication between Ball, Gutekunst, and LaFleur. It's a little bit of an interesting one because needing to facilitate communication between the three would seemingly indicate that maybe there are some gaps in communication between the three right now. We don't know for sure that that's the case, but if you are coming in and going to make sure that this is something that gets extra attention and is, you're spending more formal meetings doing this stuff, I would assume that maybe there is a gap or two that needs to get closed up a little bit. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. What he's proposing, by the way, is to make sure that those parties are getting together more often and that there is an extra layer of communication. Oftentimes, the biggest precursor to issues in an organization or just in a relationship or any way you want to look at it is a lack of communication or a miscommunication. And the more that you can talk those things through, usually the better the relationship and the better the, just organization and the better the, I think the obviously the communication is better, but it just the structure is better, and you're less likely to have things that you assume somebody was going to do, but they didn't. Like, just communication is key in those situations. So I'm for that. It's again an interesting kind of footnote there, but I think it's overall a good thing. And I think the big thing here too is that he really wants to kind of stay out of Goody and Matt and Russ Ball's business and let them do their job, hold them accountable, he said, which is his job, but let them cook, let them do their thing and not meddle in their affairs, which is a really great thing to see and exactly what you want as Ed Policy takes over and, for Mark Murphy and oversees all these areas of the team. Now, he was asked, what were his, things that he is focusing on as the president and CEO, and he gave three things: winning, keeping the Packers in Green Bay, and strengthening the Packers within the community and strengthening the community that the Packers are in, specifically, Green Bay and surrounding areas, right? And I'll admit, you get to number one, winning. Yep. Okay. Of course. Good. I strengthen the community. Number three, great. Here, number two in there, it's like keeping the Packers in Green Bay. There's a few different interpretations of that, right? The first, which we'll get to in just a moment, is just like, this is clearly just one of those, bullet points that's in the organization's, charter / just like the key bullet points. It's like, yep, we want to keep the Packers in Green Bay. It's in the DNA, if you will. That's maybe number one. Number two is that like, it's talk about low hanging fruit. Well, keeping the Packers in Green Bay. Well, it's not exactly much of a goal because that's a really easy one to achieve, right? Or the other one is there a reason that you're saying this? Or should we worry that the Packers aren't going to stay in Green Bay? Like, what does that mean? There's a couple things that are worth noting here. We'll dive into this, and I don't want to make the full episode out of this, but I do think it's noteworthy, and I do think it's worth diving into a little bit. The first thing is remember that there are current frustrations, to say the least, between the city of Green Bay and the Green Bay Packers. They're fighting over lease negotiations with Lambeau Field, and the Packers are saying we're going above and beyond, and the city of Green Bay saying you signed a lease for this huge period of time, and now you want to restructure it to make it more beneficial for you. And there's this real sort of frustrating aspect between the city and the team. Mom and dad are fighting, right? You don't want to see it, but it's happening at the moment, and you expect it to get resolved at some point in time. But there are some real, I would say, heated negotiations between the city and the team right now. So that's noteworthy as a backdrop to this. The second thing I would say is that I don't think that piece of it is irrelevant here. And I think, saying, hey, our goal is to keep the Packers in Green Bay, there is like a, thinly veiled statement of like, hey, it's always an option that this may not be the case if things don't go the way that they're supposed to. I don't think he's saying that to fans. I don't think that's necessarily the message that he's wanting to send out here per se. But I do think when there's these negotiations that are going on in the back end, it's a little bit of it feels like a little bit of a wink, wink, nudge, nudge of like, hey, this could be something that we have to talk about at some point in time, city of Green Bay, if we can't figure out something here. It was an interesting way to put this nonetheless. But I think the true nature of this genuinely is just, this is sort of in their fabric of their DNA of what they are really believing in and what they really push for. You might say, well, what does that mean, Andy? Well, I can tell you. And kudos, by the way, to Mark Leland, who did a great investigative report on October 30th of 2017. And there was a little bit after one of like the shareholders meetings, but this was a article that is out on fox11online.com. You can find it. It's titled Fox 11 Investigates Close Calls on the Packers Calling Green Bay Home. I'm going to go through a lot of this today. And I'm just going to kind of read through some of it. I'm going to skip through portions of it, but I think it's important just as like a juxtaposition to what we heard from Ed Policy. Green Bay might be the home of the Pack, but what many don't realize is Titletown has actually come close to losing the team on several occasions. The thought can be shocking. After all, the Packers have always called Green Bay home. NFL teams like the Pack form strong bonds with their fans. Would the Packers ever leave Titletown? Listen to what Packers president Mark Murphy told fans at this summer's Packers shareholders meeting. Quote, with our ownership structure, for us, the other top priority is making sure we stay in Green Bay, said Murphy. He continued, and I think investing in the community in the way we are with Titletown really helps ensure that this team will stay here. Interesting. So Ed Policy, first day on the job, not exactly, but you get my point. Winning, keeping the Packers in Green Bay, strengthening the community. Mark Murphy, back in 2017, number two, at the time, number one, he was talking about was like the Titletown district and continuing to develop that. But then he said, number two, making sure we stay in Green Bay. Number three, investing in the community. These are talking points that Ed Policy is using directly, basically from the Mark Murphy playbook here. This is nothing new that he is saying. This is literally taken. I mean, Mark Murphy said it in 2017. Quote, with our ownership structure, for us, the other top priority is making sure we stay in Green Bay. And I think investing in the community in the way that we are with Titletown really helps ensure that this team will stay here. So Fox 11 investigated and asked Murphy his choice of words. They said, quote, you bring up the words to ensure the team stays here in Green Bay, which brings up the question, is there a chance the team could leave Green Bay? This became a huge discussion on social media, which is why I'm going through this. He said, quote, well, hopefully not, said Murphy. But if you look at the history and go back many years, it's almost a miracle the Packers have stayed in Green Bay. NFL teams leaving one home for another is just part of the game. The driving force is money. The Packers hold the distinction for being the oldest NFL franchise without changing its name or home. But Packers historian Cliff Crystal points out history shows even the mighty have fallen. Quote, I mean, Los Angeles, Cleveland, Baltimore, Houston, they have all lost teams. They're ranked among the top 10 in the country in population, said Crystal. If it can happen there, obviously it could happen in Little Green Bay. Crystal agreed it's all about the money for teams. Quote, yes, as an NFL partner, you've got to hold up your end of the business, end quote, said Crystal. Packers fans, Fox 11 Investigates, caught up with enjoying the new Titletown District Park, have viewed that's more loyal when asked if they had concern, yada, yada, yada. All right, so that part is just like, I've never really had concern about the Packers leaving the team, so on and so forth. Then it continues. Let's see. Fox 11 Investigates discovered the Packers franchise came close to disappearing from Green Bay on several occasions. Crystal said it began in the early years of the team's incorporation in 1923, talked about it in 23, talked about it in 56. But Crystal would go on to say, quote, I say it often, the Packers were perpetually on their deathbed. New City Stadium saved the Packers the one time. It would transform over the years to become Lambeau Field. But even after the Super Bowl success in the mid-90s, Green Bay almost lost the Pack again in 2000. Quote, no matter how we try to adjust our pricing and to make this more adequate, we are going to continue to slide, said then team president Bob Harlan. Harlan led the push to redevelop Lambeau Field. David Steffen, who was hired to head up Team Lambeau to get out a yes vote in a referendum for a 0.5% county sales tax to fund $295 million of the cost of redevelopment, said, quote, it was critical in my estimation to the long-term success and potential survival of the organization, said Steffen. Despite success on the field and selling out every game, Steffen says the Packers needed the redevelopment to be able to generate more money. Quote, I specifically remember a call from a Southeast Wisconsin county executive I won't mention, but said, when your referendum fails, call me and we'll build a stadium for you down here. Steffen said the Packers executive team made a point not to threaten Brown County residents with an ultimatum that if the referendum didn't pass, that Green Bay could lose the Packers. Just a timeout there. The feeling at the time, I was in Green Bay at the time, was very much that while they never said it, it was intimated on multiple occasions that the Packers could leave at the time. I remember it very clearly back during the time where they were trying to get money for the stadium. He said, quote, this was Bob Harlan. I keep getting calls from people if this fails that you must have a plan B. He said, "We've already reached plan B that is not nearly the plan that we unveiled originally," said Harlan in August of 2000. Harlan was then asked, "What's plan C?" His answer, "Plan C is death." Death of the Packers, that is. We asked Stefan if the referendum failed, would the Packers still be playing at Lambeau Field? He said, quote, "In my estimation, the Green Bay Packers would likely not be in Green Bay." It continues on from here. And it goes on to saying how the Titletown district was a focus of keeping the team in Green Bay. And at the end, it quotes Mark Murphy one more time and says, "For us, making sure the team stays here is a top priority." That this is all to say, just going back to Ed policy, that keeping the Packers in Green Bay and strengthening the community are two key tenets of what Mark Murphy wanted to do, and now Ed policy is keeping that intact. Keeping the Packers in Green Bay, I think to a lot of people does just feel like a foregone conclusion that the Packers are here to stay, that they'll always be in Green Bay, et cetera, et cetera. That has not always been the case, as Cliff Crystal, who has covered the Packers like nobody else. He's the team historian. He is Mr. Green Bay Packers history, right? And Mark Murphy and Bob Harlan have said this in the past as well. It has been something that they have to prioritize in order to keep this team functioning financially, and making sure that this team can stay in Green Bay for the long term. And to Mark Murphy's credit, what he's been able to do with making it so that the Titletown district gets them more revenue even outside of seasons has been extremely important for that moving forward. But you can bet that there could come a time where Green Bay wants, or I should say the Packers want money for a stadium again, or this lease situation with the city of Green Bay to work itself out, or a million other things that could potentially happen. There could be a time and a place again where this whole issue sprouts up once again, rears its ugly head, if you will. And whether the Packers actually, quote unquote, threaten to leave or not is something that we could see happen over time. And I don't want to get into the entire logistics of this here, because you might point out to there's a charter in play, or there's something in place where they have to release all their players and cut blah, blah, blah. This hasn't necessarily been about taking the Green Bay Packers and moving them to San Antonio. As Bob Harlan said, the plan C was death. The Packers fold. They fold as a franchise. The NFL says you're no longer able to keep a team in Green Bay. The Green Bay Packers are dead. And then they open up a new franchise, an expansion franchise somewhere else. Do I think that that's going to happen? Do I think that that's something that they have to worry about, or that you should worry about anytime in the near future? Absolutely not. But I think it's worth noting that the Packers have been in these really difficult situations in a lot of decades that they've been alive in the past. And I do think that Mark Murphy made it part of his DNA that, hey, we're not going to get to that point. We're going to make it so that Green Bay it's always home with the Green Bay Packers, and that there's no issue here, that we don't have to think about this death scenario. And Ed policy carrying that over and keeping that as one of his key tenets of him being the CEO and president. It may sound jarring, it may sound shocking, it may sound irrelevant. It's not, and it's a huge thing to have on that list. And I appreciate that he's having it on the list. Arguably, I think it should probably be number one on the list, because I don't really care if they're winning, if they are the San Antonio Armadillos or something like that, right? So I would like it to be in Green Bay and have them win all their games and their Super Bowls as members of the Green Bay Packers. But I digress. I like the fact that he has those three as his key tenets: that winning, keeping the Packers in Green Bay, and strengthening the Packers within the community, and strengthening the community that they're in, are all pieces of that. I think those are three key things that should be at the top of the list. And if they do those three things through Ed Policy's era in Green Bay, winning, keeping the Packers in Green Bay, and strengthening the community of Green Bay, Ed Policy will have had a very successful tenure as president and CEO of the Green Bay Packers. All right. That's probably, again, more than I wanted to spend on that. But I think, again, this is a very interesting topic. And I do think it echoes very much what Mark Murphy, almost to a T, has said in the past. And kudos again to Fox 11 and Mark Leland for covering that back in 2017. So we can see exactly some of this stuff that is carried over from them then into now as Ed Policy takes over. All right, let's get into the remaining free agents and trade candidates that are out there that seemingly everyone wants the Packers to sign or trade for in some capacity. Some of these I think are maybe good ideas. Others, maybe not so much. Like I said, we're going to go over these lightning round and just kind of go over how they would fit in Green Bay and whether it'd be a good idea or not. Number one is Trey Hendrickson. I've done a full episode on this. You can find it out there. This was pre-draft that I went over it. I think things have changed a little bit when you spend a 4th-round pick on Barron Sorrell, a 5th-round pick on Colin Oliver. You still have 4 defensive ends on the roster potentially ahead of them right now in Brenton Cox and in LVN, Rashawn Gary, and Kingsley Enagbare. So you have a lot of defensive ends right now. I'll say it. I said it before. I'll say it again. I'm still for potentially going after Trey Hendrickson. Do I see it happening? Absolutely not. I think Hendrickson ends up back in Cincinnati. They have restarted contract negotiations between Hendrickson and the Bengals. I think that works itself out. I think he probably gets a fancy new contract. And I think giving up a pretty significant pick plus a massive contract that will hamper you with some of the stuff that you're trying to do next offseason is really, really tough. I would at least be involved in the conversations. I would at least be seeing, is there a feasible way to get Trey Hendrickson to be a Green Bay Packer? I know he's 30, but he continues to get better year over year. He's shown no signs of slowing down. He's been healthy. I would explore it. I really would. I think there's a really good reason why Green Bay is not, I think, again, giving up a key draft asset plus a huge, huge contract is just going to make it very prohibitive moving forward for some of the players that you're able to retain. Plus, when some of these contracts do start going up from players, you're going to need some cheap assets, and trading away a 2nd-round pick or whatever it would take to get Hendrickson would make it really, really tough. But I also get the here and the now, and adding Trey Hendrickson to that pass rush with Rashawn Gary on the other side and making this thing go at a very high level with Jeff Affley is very enticing. And I think you just don't get the opportunity to bring in a player like Trey Hendrickson very often. So I would at least explore it, but I think the odds of it are insanely slim. But what I will say is, if they would do it, I would be all for it. I'd be excited for it. And I do think he would make a massive impact for the Packers. So I'm in. Don't think it's ever going to happen. So do not get your hopes up. The next is TJ Watt. Bring him back to Wisconsin. This one we're not going to discuss in really much detail at all. TJ Watt's a Steeler. He's going to remain a Steeler for this year. They're going to give him his new contract. Mike Tomlin has said as much, I should say. And, Watt wants to be back with Pittsburgh. The Steelers want TJ Watt. They're on the same wavelength. They got to figure out some of the negotiation stuff of what Watt gets and things like that. Also, Watt's been a bit more banged up as of late. I would be more willing to go get Hendrickson than I would Watt, even if I think Watt maybe has been the better player over the last 3 or 4 years. My guess is that Hendrickson ends up being the better player over the next 2 to 3 years, which is really what you're acquiring them for. So I don't think TJ Watt has any chance of coming to Green Bay. I don't think he has any chance of really going anywhere outside of Pittsburgh. And I think they do get that contract negotiation done, and he remains a Pittsburgh Steeler for the foreseeable future. Those are the only trades we're going to go over today. Everyone else is still a free agent. Next up is Jadeveon Clowney. This is an interesting one. He's 32 years old. He had 78 pressures just a couple of years ago in 2023. He was unbelievable. He's had 17 sacks over the past 2 years. He's been more than capable in run defense. A couple things here. As I mentioned, A, he's 32 years old. B, he cannot stick anywhere. So if you're going to pick him up, do the whole 1-year mercenary thing, that's fine. You can do that. But just remember, he has worn out his welcome almost everywhere. And he continues to go to new team after new team after new team. No team is willing to seemingly stick with him for any real period of time. I was actually thinking that I was maybe a little bit more for this because I had a vision in my mind that not only could Clowney play on the outside, but very clearly with his size and strength, you could kick him on the inside in obvious passing downs and have him work there as well. And I thought that would be a potential really fun player to go with, Kenny Clark, Devontae White, et cetera, on the interior. You go and look at it. He hasn't played interior at all over the course of the last few seasons. Like there's a couple snaps here and there. That's it. So that part of it is not real. It's not legit. It's just, I apparently made it up in my imagination. I more of just like, I expected him to be able to do it, but he hasn't done it. So he's really just an edge rusher. This is probably one more where if you were to have an injury to Rashawn Gary or maybe even an LVN in camp for a significant period of time, and or just the ends didn't look good and you felt like you needed to add something at the end of training camp and Clowney was still out there, sure, I think you could do it. But I just think he ends up getting picked up somewhere else before that. Hopefully not in Detroit. That would not be a great situation for Green Bay. I wouldn't hate it if Green Bay did decide to pick him up. I think he's a very interesting player. I don't see it unless there is some sort of injury. And of course, we just don't want that to happen either. So I don't think it's very likely that Clowney ends up in Green Bay. But if they did decide to pick him up, I certainly wouldn't be mad about it and would just hope that he gets back to that 2023 level where, again, he had 78 pressures in that season just 2 years ago. Next up is Zadarius Smith. We can turn the page on that one. 0.0% chance. Of all the things that could possibly happen, like that I'm like, hey, never say never. This would be the one that I would say never, like never, ever. Never will you see Zadarius Smith on the, like, I can't even imagine what would need to have happen. Yeah, I think Zadarius was very happy to get out of Green Bay. I think the Packers were very happy to be done with Zadarius. Zadarius is another player that you get for a year, maybe two, and then seems to wear out his welcome pretty fast. You had his own captain's issue, not exactly like Jair, but made his own captains are like just no chance we can move on from that one. That would be the most stunning thing I think that could happen this season is if you told me Zadarius Smith was back in Green Bay playing for the Packers. All right, next up, I think there's a better chance that you do end up with the San Antonio Armadillos, meaning that the Packers become the San Antonio Armadillos, than that Zadarius Smith is back in Green Bay this year. I'll just put it that way. Matthew Judon, defensive end, is out there as well. He's coming off a season where he had a 43.0 PFF score. He is 33 years old, and everything just went for him last year. Seemingly nothing left, right? However, just a few years back in 2021 and 2022, he had 133 pressures and 31 sacks over 2 years per PFF. And who did he do that with? DeMarcus Covington as his defensive line coach. DeMarcus Covington, of course, now the Packers defensive line coach. Could DeMarcus Covington be the one that unlocks Matthew Judon again and brings him in and gets him playing at that level? Because he's only had 41 pressures over the last 2 years combined. He only played 184 snaps in 2023. He's had some injury issues. He's been beat up. He looked really bad last year. But DeMarcus Covington, Matthew Judon back together, recombine them, their powers combined, and it creates this super pressure machine of Matthew Judon. Sounds great. It sounds fun. In all likelihood, he's just done, right? He's washed up. It's probably not anything that you're going to unlock at this point of his career. Again, coming off a really down year and now at age 33, probably not something I would pursue if I were Green Bay. This would be another one of those, like, again, break glass in case of emergency situations where if you get to week 6, week 7, your pass rush just isn't performing, or you end up with some injuries and Judon's out there, could you take a look at him and hope that Covington can find a way to spark something back in him? Sure, you could try it. Just don't think it ends up very well. And I think you probably try to avoid that unless, again, you're really in a bad spot. Next up is Von Miller, 36-year-old Von Miller. He had 40 pressures this past year, but he did it in only 249 pass rush snaps per PFF. So he barely got out there and still had 40 pressures. It's a remarkable, remarkable number. He's a pass rusher only at this point in his career. You're not going to put him out there on rundowns, and you're only going to get him for so many snaps. This would be one where if they didn't draft like a designated pass rusher and they wanted to try something like this, I could have maybe seen it going that way. Now, maybe if Colin Oliver just doesn't work out and they have to move him back to linebacker and they're still interested in something like that, they could look at it. This would be another where I would say if there was an injury or if your pass rush just wasn't getting home and it's like week 6 and Von Miller's still chilling out there somehow, could you call him, bring him in, see if he could add a little juice to your pass rush group? Sure, you could do that. Add him as a rotational piece and see it. I don't see it happening during training camp, and I do not see Goody having a ton of interest at the moment in bringing in a 36-year-old Von Miller. Even if the numbers were very efficient this past year, there's just not much tread left on the tires, and he can only give you so many snaps. I don't see Goody going in that direction unless he has to at some point during the season. Next is Preston Smith. This is another one I just see as a complete no chance. As a corner, no, I'm just kidding. That's it's an overplayed joke at this point. Green Bay did fantastic last year to not only get off of his contract, but get up what was it, like a 7th round pick in return for Preston. he was addition by subtraction, quite frankly. I thought Brenton Cox was able to come in and play in his stead, and I thought Cox just played better. I think he probably has just reached the point where there's not a ton of value. Smith ended up inactive by the end of last year, a healthy scratch. It just not much left there for Preston, unfortunately. Loved him in Green Bay, but I think that time has come and gone. Speaking of which, we can get to our next guy, Rasul Douglas. I went back and I watched a lot of Rasul Douglas tape from this past year, and it is ugly. It is ugly. There is a reason he is still a free agent. He's about to turn 30. The tape was terrible. He looked about a step and a half slower, and his technique was not as good. And that's where he was really winning, was he wasn't fast, right? But he had the technique. But now he's even slower, and the technique has faded a little bit. He gave up 116.9 passer rating this past year, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. And the big thing, too, is 10 penalties. He was extremely grabby. He could not just hang with, again, technique and speed. So he tried to do the little cheats and tricks here and there. He did not get away with them. It was too obvious, too many penalties, too many completions, too many touchdowns, too high of a passer rating. It looked really poor. The amount that I love Rasul Douglas, I'm still to an extent being like, yeah, but in Green Bay, he was good. Like, can you bring him back to Green Bay and see if he can get good again? There's a piece of me that gets it, that's interested in it. You go and watch the tape and it's really, really ugly. I would stay away if I were Green Bay. I love Rasul. I loved his time in Green Bay. I think it was time to move on. And I think Green Bay made the right move. And even with the benefit of hindsight when they did. And I think now it would be not the right time to bring back Rasul Douglas. Maybe some other team will take a flyer. My guess is somebody does, but I don't think it's Green Bay, and I don't think he ends up back with the Packers. Next is Asante Samuel Jr., coming off of a year where he only played 234 snaps, coming off a pretty significant neck injury. He is a horrible tackler, and I mean a horrible tackler, in a defense that is predicated on rallying and tackling. He is not a good fit for Jeff Afley's defense. And yet, I still would kind of consider it. He's only 26 years old in October. He's got great ball skills. You would have to play him on passing downs only. So you're talking about like third in obvious pass situations, third down, fourth down, etc. That's it. You can't play him on early downs. You don't really need him to play on early downs. But here's the other thing. He doesn't give you anything on special teams. He's not going to take a fourth corner position in Green Bay. And I don't think he's going to be out there over Hobbs, Nixon, or Valentine at this point. And even when he did play this past year, those 234 snaps, it wasn't great. So I'm going to say no to Asante, but there's a piece of me that just really liked him coming out of college and wants to see him succeed. And maybe if you can only play him on passing downs, he could. But I think, especially with neck injuries, which Green Bay stays away from pretty regularly, I can't see this one happening for the Packers. Number 10 is Mike Hilton, 31 years old. Here's the big thing. He's 5'9", doesn't really fit Green Bay's height thresholds. He's a slot corner only, gave up 105.6 passer rating this past year. He's actually a good tackler for his size, but with him being a slot, they already got Nixon and Hobbs and Bullard and so many of those guys that can play slot. I just don't see Mike Hilton being the answer for them. Stephon Gilmore, 35 years old in September, 35 years old. Doesn't have the same speed he used to. Gave up a 99.8 passer rating this past year. He's primarily an outside corner. This is one where if he's out there later in the year and you've got some injuries, let's say Kamal Haddon, Kalen King, Micah Robinson are your 4th, 5th, and 6th, then a lot of these other guys get signed and those guys don't step up. The young guys don't step up. And you have Keyshawn Nixon or Nate Hobbs or Carrington Valentine get hurt. Could you bring in a Stephon Gilmore, in October and bring him in and have him play, a little bit here and there as a sort of spot starter? Sure, I think you could do that, but I don't think he's a player that you pick up in camp. And I think you let some of these young players develop before you would get to that point. The next one is Kendall Fuller. He's primarily a wide corner. He has played some slot in the past. He's 30 years old, 5'11", 198, only allowed 1 touchdown this past year. He's a very consistent tackler. Here's the weird thing. He was released in February. He could have signed with any team even prior to free agency, which gave him a huge leg up on everything. Yet here we are in the middle of June, and nobody has still picked him up. So there has to be some reason why I would think. I could see him very much fitting in Jeff Hafley's defense. He doesn't really play special teams, which again is a little bit of an issue. I would be somewhat interested in Kendall Fuller. I think there's a good enough player there where if you got him on the right deal, I think you could bring him in and have him still play a part for this defense. I'm not saying it's like this huge free agent move or anything like that, but if you get him relatively cheap and bring him in and have him compete, sure, why the heck not? Kind of think of it as like the McCole Hardman for the defense or in the secondary at corner. And I would be for that. I think he could actually still help this team. So Fuller is one of the rare ones where I would make the argument of like, yeah, bring him in, see what he's got. And I don't think it's going to cost anything exorbitant where, you're really regretting it after the fact if it doesn't work out. I think give him a 1 year, $3 million deal with incentives. And I don't know, maybe he's holding out for something bigger than that, which is why he hasn't signed, but I would at least take a look at it if I were Green Bay. Jack Jones is another name I heard thrown out quite a bit. Listen, the Patriots and the Raiders just basically gave up on this guy. He will make plays. He will absolutely make some big plays for you, but he gives up a lot of plays. Also, he's not a special teams guy. He's a horrible tackler. Gave up 115.8 passer rating this past year and gave up 10 touchdowns in 2024. Like I said, the Patriots and Raiders just both completely gave up on him, and he hasn't been able to sign anywhere else, despite the fact that he would probably be a pretty cheap option for teams. This is one where if you wanted to fill a roster spot, bring him in, have him compete in camp. If you could get him on like a 1 year, $2 million non-guaranteed deal. And if he makes camp or if he makes it out of camp, great. If he doesn't, you just release him, no harm, no foul. Sure, you could do that. I just don't think there's much there. And I would probably get a better look at Kamal Haddon, Kalen King, and Micah Robinson before I do anything with Jack Jones. Number 14 is Mercedes Lewis. We've talked about this one a little bit. I love this story. I would love to bring Mercedes in. I just don't think it makes much sense. Go with a Messiah Swinson or a Ben Sims or a John Fitzpatrick as your number 3. They give you a little bit more juice as a receiving tight end than what Mercedes does. Mercedes is just a pseudo offensive lineman at this point. I'd probably rather bring in an Anthony Belton as a 6th offensive lineman than just go with Mercedes Lewis, who nobody is really honoring as a receiver anyway. So I love Mercedes. If you want to bring him back, I'd be all for it. But if it were my decision, I would say let's just kind of go in a different direction at this point in time, even though I do love him as a player, and I hope he does get that one final season, just hopefully not in the NFC North against Green Bay. Then last but not least is any sort of offensive lineman, a Will Hernandez, a Brandon Sheriff, a Dalton Reisner, etc. I wouldn't be like, oh my God, what are they doing? But I think you have about 11 or 12 guys that are capable of making a 53-man roster already, and they're young and they're talented. I would let those guys go out and compete for it. Then if something does happen, injury or other, where it just makes sense to pick somebody like that up, I think you're going to still be able to find one of those guys, if not more, available as you get to the end of training camp. And if you do have an injury or just some underperformers where you want to pick somebody up, I think you'll be able to do it. And I would just wait until that point in time. And for the time being, let all of those young, talented offensive linemen go out and compete. So lightning round here, Trey Hendrickson, I'd be in. I don't think Green Bay will be. DJ Watt's going to stay in Pittsburgh. Clowney's an interesting one. I wouldn't hate it. I just would really not expect it. Za'Darius Smith is no chance. Judon is just past his prime. Don't think it makes sense. Von Miller, I wouldn't hate, but again, you'd have to have the right set of circumstances, and I don't expect Green Bay to be in those right set of circumstances. Preston Smith, there's no way. Rasul looked really bad this past year. Samuel, I'd at least entertain if you could get him for cheap and play him on obvious passing downs. Just think some other team ends up giving him more money than Green Bay probably would. Mike Hilton, too small and old and just slot only guy. Stephon Gilmore, if it's a break glass in case of emergency situation, sure. Just have to happen in season, not now. Kendall Fuller, I'd be a little bit interested in. Jack Jones, if you could get him 1 year minimum, sure, bring him in, have him compete, but I don't see that being the case. Don't think they'll sign him. Mercedes Lewis, I would pass on, as well as any of the offensive linemen that are out there. That is going to do it for me today. Thank you so much for joining me. Always appreciate it. We'll be right back here tomorrow with an all new episode. You can find me on social media again at Andy Herman NFL. Shout out to our All-Pro and Hall of Fame members, Most Hated Minnesotan, PJ Wynn, John Wild, Brandon Paletta, Boom Handle, Donald Lee, Lori Lord, Baby QB, David McCluskey, Donald Decker, Alex Wong, Peter Rataka, Jay Zimmerman, B. Brown, Puerto Rican Packer, Dan Gessford, Dylan Pat Scott, SoCal Pack, Chris Rager, Izzy Roberts, Ian Ewing, Jay Conner, Carlo Delgado, Willie Winkle, Sinkle, Jen Wright, The Gable Storm, Matt Geiger, and Pack Attack Cast. I'll see you guys tomorrow, but until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.